Hello, everybody. We're here with Matt Beane, and I'm going to jump right into it with the first question. Could you please describe your research focus to us in just a couple of sentences?
Sure. Sentence one is, I study robots and work. What difference robots make for the way work gets done. And sentence two is why. And that's because I'm interested in how humans adapt to technical change. So under the hood, I'm a learning person, like skills, individual, group, organizational adaptation, but the case that I use to do that kind of research is robots and work.
I see. And what made you decide to tackle this subject? How'd you get into it, and why do you stay?
Well, so the robots answer comes from I don't know, age 4, 6, something like that. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I've been absolutely profoundly obsessed with advanced technology, science fiction, and robots in particular. I wasn't aware of that. It's not in my application for my doctoral program. I didn't name that as a research focus. I thought I was going to use novel sensors to study sales team interactions because I had done previous work in team research. And within 6 months, just announced to everybody it was robots, and they all looked at me like, what? I just, at that point, I had no explanation. And it was just a sort of a compulsion to know. It turns out they're a great example for research in retrospect, if you're interested in studying work, because they operate on time and spatial resolutions that are familiar to humans. Like, they do physical work that is intelligible to humans. And it makes it easier for me, being the data collection instrument, to gather data. A high frequency trading algorithm moves a lot faster and in ways that you just can't take notes on. So that's a ex post facto justification that I can offer for this sort of childhood obsession translated into research.
Got it. Thank you. What can students expect to learn in one of your classes that isn't necessarily on the curriculum?
That's fascinating. Yeah. So in every class that I teach, you're going to get a deep, sort of uncomfortably practical dive in the tactics of effective daily work interaction, i.e., like how to have a productive conversation. My consulting career, before going back to getting my PhD, I worked in a firm that specialized in doing training for intact teams on how to have everything from a productive meeting to how to collaborate more effectively over time. And in particular, how to have touchy or difficult conversations more productively. And so it doesn't matter what class you're taking with me. That's going to be 15% of your experience, basically.
What popular entrepreneurial advice do you disagree with?
Well, okay. So I'm going to say leaning towards disagree, because there's helpful guidance in any advice. And I'm sure you've gotten this from somebody else, but the move fast and break things paradigm was useful for a time, and it remains a helpful orientation, I think, but it's not at all necessary. Maybe move fast and bend things with permission as much as possible. It's not necessary to break things and to move at paces that most people find disconcerting, inappropriate, uncomfortable, to make the kind of progress that you need to. It is often necessary to go faster than and take more risk than you are comfortable with. Your own standard of comfort and other standards of comfort are dangerous. That's dangerous to pay attention to. But that saying conflates comfort and catastrophe. Like you don't distinguish between, what's the zone in between do no horrible, terrible harm, or even unnecessary harm, unnecessary speed. Because some value comes from reflection, a lot of it, a long walk on the beach after a sleepless night. So I just don't even bother saying that kind of thing to people. I've kind of let it go. It helped me. Hearing that helped me. It did kind of motivate me to move faster and take more risk. So there.
Could you give me an example where failure and/or success has really affected you as a person?
Yes, I could. I can give you many. Let's see. So I think probably a useful one is that in 2015, not too many people know this. I started at UCSB in 2018, I suppose. But in 2015, I sort of went on the academic job market early, looking for an academic job, thinking I was sort of done. And I had some success there, but not remotely how I didn't get the kind of job talks or job offers that I was hoping for or expecting. And I think honestly, in retrospect, it's because my heart wasn't in it. Like you're at least in my field, you're supposed to have a paper you trot out and say, like, this is the thing that represents me in my work. I did not love that paper, but at the time I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know any different. I didn't know what better would feel like. And so I assumed this is fine. And it really wasn't. I didn't get great signals on the job market because of that, I think. And so failed, quote unquote, to get the kind of academic job that I expected. At the same time, I had somebody aggressively pursue me to help co-found a startup, which I wasn't expecting, wasn't planning for, and would have represented, and did to many, quite an abject failure. Like had been trained for 6 years to be an academic and to be a researcher. And so leaving all of that behind to go join a startup, I assumed I wouldn't come back. And so going to take that job was the sort of double failure. It was like, I felt like very passionate about it, but at the same time, a lot of people whose opinions I cared about, to them, that looked like two huge failures in a row, me included.
What advice would you give to graduate students who are interested in careers both in academia and entrepreneurship?
I think I just opened that can of worms, didn't I? Yeah, so you'd better care, like a lot. The risks associated with academia are that you end up doing work that you are not particularly passionate about and you become known for, and ironically, therefore, have to do more of and defend. And then you end up with a draining career that doesn't make the most out of your talents. And if you can, and then on the industry side, actually, if you're into research, it's really difficult to get into industry in a way that will allow you to continue to do the activities that you find that drove you to be curious enough about the world to go get a PhD in the first place. So I don't have advice in terms of how to manage both at once. All I can say is that for me, I've felt compelled to do both. Like I can't help it, in spite of myself, and sometimes at great costs. I end up needing to do both. There are numerous places that I could have landed or was expected to go that look down on me doing both of those things. It's enormously stressful. And so if you don't have to try to do both, don't. That's even worse. I mean, you'll end up, you could get, I mean, I have the negative experiences to show for it. I think it's very difficult to rock between doing applied work, essentially, trying to put your research knowledge to work and like, let me see if I can improve upon this thing that I've discovered in my research, but then also find your way back to doing some research that generates new questions and new insights and so on. So don't. If you don't really, really need to, and by the way, you'll know already because you already have pain to show for it, that you just can't help it. You're compelled. And in that case, trying to figure out a healthy iteration cycle between the two is really critical. It can be a year over here, a year over there, maybe even two, something like that, or maybe different streams of work simultaneously. That's really important. And the last piece I'll say about that is making connections with people that complement you in those domains, because you will be strong in neither, essentially. And by strong, I mean A+. You'll be the person who bridges those two domains. You'll be very capable, obviously, in one, maybe even in both, but you're not going to be a wunderkind. And so making connections with people who only and forever and should be in that one swim lane, so that you know how to make translations across that boundary, that has been really, really essential for me.
Can you describe to me the most exciting or the scariest minute of your experience as an entrepreneur?
Let's see. Yeah, so the startup that I was in before coming to UCSB, we were developing a low-cost full stack solution that involved a very inexpensive sensor that you could track in 3D space at, say, a kilohertz. So very, very high rep rate. And it used radio frequency energy, so it could sense through objects and so on where that thing was. All kinds of amazing potential applications. And the real moment for all of us, actually, there were only five actually at the time that this happened. The moment for all of us was that we had visualized the data that the system produced on oscilloscopes and via MATLAB up until that point. And I led a project to work with a vendor to create beautiful, just sort of very simple 3D rendering of where these beacons that we could track were sitting in a coordinate system. It's a very simple XYZ plot. Each beacon had a different color dot. And we just thought it'll be good. You know, we want to sort of see what this data looks like in real time as you move these things around. All we did for about 4 hours is just move these balls around on the screen. We'd have somebody standing over the device and somebody over there, like, it's magic, it works. All of us had built this system. We knew exactly what it was, but there was this moment of actually seeing it in this sort of visceral way that we knew would be compelling to other people. Finally, we could communicate without using our mouths about what we were doing in a way that was undeniable and profound. We could hold up a large piece of cardboard in between our sensor and the sensing array and move the thing around, and you see, and it just, we realized a huge chunk of our work was done. We were transfixed, but we knew then we didn't have to be there and talk someone through what we were doing in order to transfix them. We didn't have to do that whole storytelling thing. That was a huge, instantly we went out for beers and celebrated. We knew right away that was just a profound positive moment.
That's incredible. What are the most critical changes that we must make to face the future effectively? And what are the barriers to enacting these changes?
Well, so I'm going to make no claim that I'm going to answer your question, but I'm not going to make a claim about where my answers sit in the macro ordering of all possible answers to that question. So something to do with climate, politics, and computation should be very close to the top of the list and maybe above what I'm about to say. What I tend to focus on in my research, and I think is a really under-attended to problem that is pervasive and really represents a serious risk for humanity and a huge opportunity, is the question of this question I started with, which is how do we adapt to new ways of doing things that are associated with these new technologies we're creating. A lot of people worry about, say, jobs getting destroyed, or are curious about jobs getting created from new technology, and that's important. But in the last 2 years, the three of us have learned to do this, what we are doing right now. That affects billions of people. Technological change happens to most of us once a week. It's a weekly thing. And there are these little moments when you need to learn to do something slightly differently in order to accommodate the world as it shifts underneath our feet. I think that pace of change is accelerating. And we're doing that, and this is evident in, say, my TED Talk and other pieces of my research. We're doing that in a way that breaks the chain that we can naturally and normally participate in, that allows us to vicariously learn this new stuff. It makes it more difficult to hang around with somebody who's an expert and just help them with something so that you can learn. And that is also pervasive. Now I have data on that across numerous professions around the globe. Really, the burden's on the reader to prove otherwise, that it's not happening somewhere. That is how we've built skill and adapted to change for between, depending on how you count, say, 40,000 years and 160,000 years ago until now. And we're breaking that. So there's a huge opportunity, which is reconstituting that using the technologies that we have available and helping the world maintain this treadmill of building skill to adapt. But I don't think that's getting much attention. And I think that's like an existential risk for the species.
Matt, it has been an absolute joy talking with you. Thank you for making time to share your incredible insight and draw on all of your experience. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Honestly, I'm glad to be asked, and hopefully it's helpful.
That was awesome, man. Thanks for the talk.